Hey folks, Changing Reason here. While I generally try to stay away from making predictions, today I want to at least offer a potential interpretation of a theme that has emerged from both the Trump and Clinton campaigns and from the media, namely that a disputed election is becoming a distinct possibility. This notion is being pushed with such fervor that I can't help but suspect that the American people are being deliberately primed for just such a scenario. Now, you'll find plenty of claims, particularly among Trump supporters within the truth community, that the election is being rigged for Hillary Clinton. The folks towing this line seem largely convinced that Trump is the, quote, real deal, fighting an uphill battle all alone against a corrupt establishment dead set on installing Hillary into the presidency. As I discussed in my previous video, I think this is a naively mistaken view. The idea of a rigged election presupposes that said election is an otherwise legitimate contest, that specific actions are required in order to undermine, manipulate, or falsify the outcome. However, I argue that presidential elections are not rigged for or against a candidate, as they are not actual contests. They are scripted productions. The outcomes of presidential elections are no more rigged than the outcomes of professional wrestling matches. The audience may be surprised, but the contestants and those putting on the show certainly are not. Again, the current narrative of this race seems to be guiding us toward a climax involving a disputed election, and one that could make the 2000 Florida spectacle look like child's play. Donald Trump has referenced the potential of an election rigged for Hillary Clinton several times since his nomination, but has ramped up this rhetoric substantially since the second debate, doubling down on this claim at the final debate and at subsequent public appearances.
Looking at anything now, I'll look at it at the time. What I've seen is so bad. First of all, the media is so dishonest and so corrupt, and the pile-on is so amazing. The New York Times actually wrote an article about it that they don't even care. It's so dishonest, and they've poisoned the minds of the voters. But unfortunately for them, I think the voters are seeing through it. I think they're going to see through it. We'll find out on November 8th, but I think they're going to see through it.
But, sir,
if you look, excuse me, Chris, if you look at your voter rolls, you will see millions of people that are registered to vote. Millions. This isn't coming from me. This is coming from Pew Report and other places. Millions of people that are registered to vote that shouldn't be registered to vote.
The election is rigged.
It's a rigged system. It's a rigged election. This is a rigged system, folks.
The process is rigged. This whole election is being rigged. These lies...
I would like to promise and pledge to all of my voters and supporters and to all of the people of the United States that I will totally accept the results of this great and historic presidential election if I win.
This has, of course, been met with the predictable responses.
I have never seen in my lifetime or in modern political history any presidential candidate trying to discredit the elections and the election process before votes have even taken place. It's unprecedented.
Similarly, Hillary Clinton is continuing to push the idea that Trump is somehow in cahoots with Vladimir Putin, and that Russia is perpetrating cyber espionage against the United States with the specific intent of influencing this election to the advantage of Trump.
Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear you won't admit
No, you're
that the
puppet.
Russians have engaged in cyber attacks against the United States of America, that you encouraged espionage against our people, that you are willing to spout the Putin line sign up for his wish list, break up NATO, do whatever he wants to do, and that you continue to get help from him because he has a very clear favorite in this race. So I think that this is such an unprecedented situation. We've never had a foreign government trying to interfere in our election. We have 17 intelligence agencies, civilian and military, who have all concluded that these espionage attacks, these cyber attacks, come from the highest levels of the Kremlin, and they are designed to influence our election. I find that deeply disturbing.
Meanwhile, the media, though simultaneously claiming that rigging an election is highly unlikely, if not impossible, are nonetheless keeping the notion of a rigged election front and center, while also, in these closing days, claiming that the race may be tightening, even dropping the occasional reference to the circumstances in Florida that led to Bush v. Gore, ultimately decided by the U.S. Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision along partisan lines. As a related plot twist, we are reminded that there are currently only 8 Supreme Court justices, 4 liberals and 4 conservatives. We even have a potential twist within a twist. Due to her highly unusual public criticism of Donald Trump this past July, liberal Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg may be obligated to recuse herself if a case related to a disputed election result were to make its way to the Supreme Court, thus giving the conservative justices a 1-vote advantage. Additionally, we see WikiLeaks and Project Veritas chiming in to further reinforce suspicions of electoral and other impropriety. Even the FBI is playing along, as if on cue. Just yesterday, October 28th, 11 days before the election, FBI Director James Comey announced that additional emails from Hillary's private server, supposedly uncovered during an unrelated and ongoing investigation of former Senator Anthony Weiner, are to be reviewed, essentially reopening the FBI's investigation of Clinton that had previously been closed in July. While this development has nothing to do with allegations related to election tampering, it does go a long way toward upping the drama and further justifying razor-thin margins on Election Day. I don't know about you, but to me, all of these things taken together feel a bit too choreographed. And as a side note, I consider both WikiLeaks and Project Veritas as nothing more than clever plot devices. These 2 entities have yet to disclose anything that is particularly surprising or doesn't propagate predictable mainstream political melodrama. Come talk to me when they disclose something about hoax mass shootings and terrorist attacks. Until then, neither, as far as I'm concerned, should be taken seriously by anyone genuinely interested in the truth. So in a nutshell, both Trump and Clinton are serving their respective supporters the impression that funny business is at play. The media are happily setting the table, and far too many of us are eating it up. And while I believe that whoever were to eventually prevail after a disputed election would have been set up to win from the beginning, and that the dispute itself would be merely a part of the script, the subsequent civil unrest could be very real, especially if the whole affair were to drag out for weeks or months, or if the, quote, loser simply refuses to concede. Just imagine it. In such a scenario, the American people would be whipped into a lather, which is precisely what I am beginning to believe this particular election cycle is all about. The ultimate distraction, the perfect misdirection, a brilliant cover under which the ruling class can further escalate the pursuit of its agendas, as the American people are heated to a rolling boil over the results of an election that never was. And I'd like to add that while so many of us are convinced this election will go to Hillary, I'm not so sure yet. Is it not possible that those pulling the strings are counting on the widespread bipartisan disdain for Hillary Clinton in order to get away with placing someone much worse into office? someone with even less integrity, willing to be the public face of some truly awful things. It's been speculated in some circles that Trump is in the race to make Hillary more palatable, but perhaps the opposite is true. We need to remind ourselves that the notion of a Trump presidency is not new. He's been publicly flirting with the idea since 1987, even entering the 2000 race, albeit briefly, in pursuit of the Reform Party nomination, which ultimately went to world-class shitheel Pat Buchanan. And despite his current incarnation as a political outsider and proclaimed desire to, quote, drain the swamp, Donald Trump has spent a good deal of money over the past 3 decades to keep the swamp intact. In fact, between 1989 and 2015, Trump spent at least $1.8 million in political contributions to both Democrats and Republicans, with 1999, the year he pursued the Reform Party nomination, being the only year he contributed substantially outside of the Big Two. And in this case, he basically donated $50,000 to himself. While consistently giving to both parties, the majority of Trump's money went toward Democrats until 2010, at which point he made an abrupt shift in his contribution habits and began donating almost exclusively to the GOP. I suspect that this is when the decision was made to eventually run Trump as a Republican presidential candidate. Recall that he came very close to entering the 2012 race. Beneficiaries of Trump's contributions over the years include Democrats Ted Kennedy, Tom Daschle, Charlie Rangel, Chuck Schumer, Harry Reid, John Kerry, Anthony Weiner, Joe Biden, and Hillary Clinton. On the Republican side, recipients include John McCain, Newt Gingrich, Mitch McConnell, Mark Foley, Lindsey Graham, and George W. Bush. It should be noted that the $1.8 million figure likely does not include all of Trump's contributions to super PACs, as such transactions do not require public disclosure. For example, in 2012, Trump endorsed Mitt Romney, and according to Trump's executive vice president and special counsel, Michael Cohen, Donald donated, quote, millions of dollars to pro-Mitt Romney super PACs. In short, the notion that Trump is or ever was a take-no-prisoners political outsider is patently absurd. Not only has he been eyeballing the White House for nearly 30 years, his record paints a clear picture of a man deeply immersed in Washington politics, leaning wherever the political winds happen to blow, while hedging his bets by keeping plenty of palms greased on both sides of the aisle. Far from being anti-establishment, Donald Trump could be the establishment's poster child, precisely positioned at the intersection of media, politics, and big business. As a further demonstration of Trump's slithery nature, here's Trump in 2008 absolutely gushing over the Clintons, particularly Hillary.
Well, I think her history is far from being over. I'd like to answer that question in another 15 years from now. I think she's going to go down at a minimum as a great senator. I think she is a great wife to a president. And I think Bill Clinton was a great president. You know, you look at the country then. The economy was doing great. Look at what happened during the Clinton years. I mean, we had no war. The economy was doing great. Everybody was happy. A lot of people hated him because they were jealous as hell. You know, people get jealous and they hate you. People don't like him because they're jealous of him. But Bill Clinton was a great president. I mean, I hope we can be so lucky in terms of the economy and in terms of other aspects. I mean, we weren't in wars with two nations. I'm not blaming Afghanistan, by the way, is probably a place that we should be. Iraq, we shouldn't be. Bill Clinton was a great president. Hillary Clinton is a great woman and a good woman.
Now, you said of Hillary Clinton that she was, quote, pretty badly abused during her presidential campaign. Why do you say that?
I thought that they roughed her up pretty good. I think she's a wonderful woman. I think that she's a little bit misunderstood. You know, Hillary's a very smart woman, very tough woman. That's fine. But she's also a very nice person. And I know Hillary, and I know her husband very well. They're fine people. I thought, and you know, part of that is a rough political battle. I thought she was roughed up. I thought she, and I'm not knocking the other side. You know, you want to win a battle, so if it gets a little bit nasty, it is politics, and politics is a tough game. But I thought she was perhaps unnecessarily roughed up. She took some pretty hard hits.
That same year, Trump wrote in a blog post that Hillary Clinton would, quote, make a great president or vice president. And in this March 2012 interview with Fox News, Trump, while stopping short of a formal endorsement of Hillary, which would have been awkward considering he was at the time a Mitt Romney surrogate, again makes his admiration for both Bill and Hillary Clinton unambiguously clear.
Hillary Clinton, I think, is a terrific woman. I mean, I'm a little biased because I've known her for years. I live in New York, she lives in New York, and I've known her and her husband for years, and I really like them both a lot. And I think she really works hard, and I think she, again, she's given an agenda that's not all of her, but I think she really works hard, and I think she does a good job, and I like her.
It should be acknowledged here that in 2010, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton stated that her current role would be her, quote, last public position, end quote, that she had no desire to run for president again. Yet, in this interview, Donald Trump, of all people, is quite certain she will run again in 2016.
Do you think that she says she's out at the end of this term? Do you think we're going to see her again running for office?
I think so. I think, you know, assuming she's healthy, which I hope she will be, I think she probably runs after the next 4 years, I would imagine.
You support her?
I don't want to get into this because I'll get myself into trouble. But
That's why I asked you, to see if we get into trouble.
I just like her. I like her, and I like her husband. Her husband made a speech on Monday at Mar-a-Lago, and it was very well received. And he's a really good guy, and she's a really good person and woman.
Obviously, he was right. Curiously, Trump makes a point of qualifying his prediction with a reference to Hillary Clinton's health, even though no one at the time was publicly airing any such concerns. Hillary didn't reportedly fall and receive a concussion until December 2012, 9 months later. In literature, this is called foreshadowing. For as we all know, much has been made of Hillary's health throughout the 2016 campaign. Even as recently as August 2013, Trump, still hedging it seems, can't commit to anything remotely approaching a full-throated criticism of Hillary Clinton.
Well, first of all, I know her very well, and I know her husband very well, and I like them both. And they are, just really terrific people. I like them both very much, but I think you'll be looking at the record of Hillary Clinton and how did she do as Secretary of State, probably above and beyond everybody else and everything else. You'll be looking at her record, and everybody else will be looking at her record. I don't know that Benghazi, it doesn't seem to have resonated like perhaps it should have, but many other things have come up, and the world is in turmoil. And I think that a lot of people will be looking at Hillary's record as Secretary of State, and she will be defending that record, and I'm sure she'll do a good job of defending it, but that will be the thing they will be going for.
Yet, here we are in 2016, with Trump now claiming that Hillary is basically the worst human being on the planet.
We have an increase in murder within our cities, the biggest in 45 years. We have a divided nation because people like her, and believe me, she has tremendous hate in her heart. And when she said deplorables, she meant it. And when she said irredeemable, they're irredeemable. You didn't mention that. But when she said they're irredeemable, to me, that might have been even worse.
She said some of them are irredeemable.
She's got tremendous hatred.
Teenage girls across America must be in awe of Trump's capacity to turn on a friend. That's a joke, of course. They're still friends. So what if, just what if, contrary to popular belief, Clintons, Bushes, and Obamas are not as bad as it gets? Perhaps they were just prelude. It's something to think about. Anyway, as I said in the opening, I'm not in the business of predictions. However, I do believe that the likelihood of some sort of disputed election scenario is reasonable based on what we are currently seeing. Of course, things may very well play out differently. We won't have to wait long to find out. But regardless of its specific nature, I do believe something unprecedented is brewing, and we need to prepare ourselves for what is to come on November 8th, and in the days, weeks, and months to follow. We must allow ourselves to see these unfolding events with clear and sober eyes. For as is the case with so much else in our world, things will most likely not be as they seem.